In the early hours of August 20th, 2016, in a quiet Minnesota town still recovering from a recent tornado, a 5-year-old girl named Elena Xener was asleep in her bedroom. She was wrapped in her pink frozen blanket, the one with Princess Elsa, with no idea that someone her family trusted was about to make a choice that would break everything. This wasn't a stranger. It was someone they knew, a family friend, a coworker of her dad, a man who played softball with him every Friday night, someone who'd stayed over at their house before and knew exactly where Elena's room was. That night, 25-year-old Zachary Todd Anderson had been out drinking with Elena's parents. They laughed together at the local bar, made plans for future games. And then, while the family slept, Anderson made a decision that would end a child's life and expose a decade of disturbing behavior that had gone unnoticed. This is the story of Elena, a story about trust broken in a close-knit community, a town that had already suffered too much, a story of police racing against time, and a family who turned their grief into something greater. I'm your host at Cold Casts, and today we're diving into every detail of a case that raises a haunting question. How do you know who to trust? To understand what happened to Elena, you first have to understand Watkins, Minnesota. With about 1,000 people, it's a town that barely shows up on most maps. Locals call it a stoplight-free town, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where people stay for generations, and where kids grow up alongside the children of their parents' childhood friends. Watkins is in Meeker County, central Minnesota, sitting on Highway 55 between Kimball and Eden Valley. It's roughly 70 miles from Minneapolis and 25 miles south of St. Cloud. It's farming country, quiet, steady, and far from city life. It's the kind of place people move to because they want to raise their children in peace, surrounded by neighbors who look out for each other. At the center of the town is St. Anthony Catholic Church on Central Avenue. With about 250 families in its congregation, it's more than a church. It's where the town gathers for baptisms, funerals, festivals, or moments of crisis. It's where Watkins comes together. And in the years before Elena's death, Watkins had already been through more than its share. In August 2015, a year before the tornado, the town lost 2 teenagers in a crash caused by a drunk driver. One of those teens was Zachary Rohrbeck, Elena's cousin. The Hurl family had already buried 1 child, already endured the kind of pain few understand. But more heartbreak was coming. On July 11, 2016, just over a month before Elena's death, a tornado warning was issued at 5:55 p.m. What hit Watkins that night was classified as an EF2 tornado, with winds reaching up to 125 miles per hour. The storm left a 2-mile-long, 600-foot-wide path of destruction. 20-5 homes were damaged, 12 of them severely. 5 businesses were hit. An assisted living center had to evacuate 50 residents due to roof damage. In the mobile home park, a woman named Dolores Faber was pinned beneath a table and hospitalized. Meeker County Sheriff Brian Cruz later called it the worst storm the area had seen in a decade. Longtime resident Luann Hess said she'd never experienced anything that disruptive in her 38 years living there. Still, the town came together fast. Inside City Hall, volunteers set up a donation table with soaps, food, and basic supplies. Neighbors helped one another clear debris and patch roofs. Watkins responded the way small towns do, with care and action. But here's the part no one could have known. That tornado, and everything that followed, would set the stage for something even more tragic. Just weeks later, the tornado's path had torn straight down the street where the Hurl family lived. By mid-August 2016, Watkins was still healing. Donation tables remained in City Hall. Blue tarps covered damaged roofs. The The steady noise of repairs, hammers, saws, voices echoed throughout town. Watkins had already endured a fatal crash and a natural disaster. Now, something even darker was coming. Elena Xener was born on Halloween, October 31st, 2010, in St. Cloud, Minnesota. Her family called her their little peanut from the start. At 5 years old, she had shoulder-length sandy blonde hair, bright brown eyes, and a joyful spirit that seemed to lift any room she walked into. Weighing just 45 pounds, Elena radiated the kind of warmth and light that's rare. Even in children. Her mother, Kayla Oral, once described her morning routine. Elena would come into their room to give everyone a kiss and check that they were okay. Imagine that, a 5-year-old waking up and making sure everyone else felt loved. That was Elena. Family friend Nicole Rohrbeck put it best. I've never seen her unhappy. Her obituary later said she brought joy to others simply by smiling and offering kind words. She loved animals, sang constantly, and was a good friend to everyone she met. Like many little girls her age, Elena had her favorites: My Little Pony, sparkly skirts, pink and purple anything. Disney's Frozen was her favorite movie, and she adored Princess Elsa. Her pink Elsa blanket was a nightly companion. Her favorite song? You Are My Sunshine. Her family lovingly called it her sun song. That song would later hold a heartbreaking place in her funeral service. But Elena wasn't just a lover of princesses. She was adventurous too. She went hunting with her father, Matt Oral. She and her older brother Carter spent hours riding go-karts that Matt had built, hula hooping, and biking through their neighborhood, the kind of freedom small-town kids grow up with. Elena's bond with Carter, about 3 years older than her, was especially strong. Her obituary noted how much she loved learning from him and how she gave the best hugs. She had just finished preschool at Eden Valley Watkins Elementary, where Kayla worked and volunteered. Her kindergarten teacher, Dawn Quatzila, had already been assigned. The new school year was just 2 weeks away. Dawn would never get the chance to teach her. The Oral family was deeply woven into the Watkins community. Elena's paternal grandparents, Rick and Kim Oral, owned the Riverside Tavern in nearby Litchfield. Her maternal grandparents, Jeff and Mary Well, lived in Rockville. Aunts, uncles, and cousins filled the surrounding towns. The family regularly attended St. Anthony Catholic Church and took part in community events. Despite her young age, Elena had already known loss. Her obituary mentioned the passing of several great-grandparents and, more heartbreakingly, her cousins Zyler Roberts and Zachary Rohrbeck. Zachary was the teen killed in the drunk driving crash in 2015, so yes, the family had already known grief. But nothing could prepare them for what came next. At Elena's funeral, Reverend Aaron Nett of St. Anthony Church spoke of her generous spirit. She had a love for others which was free and innocent. And that's what children should be, free and innocent. That's who Elena was. Until the early morning of August 20th, 2016, Friday, August 19th, had started as a regular summer evening. Matt Oral and his friend Zachary Anderson were doing what they always did, playing softball with the River Rats, a local rec league team. It was tradition, the kind of thing that working men looked forward to all week. Matt worked for Vanguard Utility Partners as a utility locator. It was outdoor physical labor, the kind that makes Friday night beers feel earned. Anderson worked for the same company, just on a different crew. Over the years, they'd become close, not just coworkers, but friends. Anderson had become a familiar face at the softball games. Around 10:30 p.m., both men were still at the field, playing with their team. With no one realizing that the night would be anything but routine. It was a typical August evening in Minnesota. Warm, easy, with late sunset light and the sounds of aluminum bats cracking across ball fields. After the game ended around 11 o'clock, the group decided to keep the night going at Riverside Tavern in Forest City. Matt Ertl and Zachary Anderson arrived between 11 o'clock and 1 a.m. Anderson had 2 beers. And like many nights before, the conversation drifted to hunting. He brought up his family's cabin up north, a quiet retreat for deer season, fishing, and escaping everyday stress. Matt didn't think much of it. Anderson had mentioned the cabin before. It was just talk. Around 1:30 a.m., the group moved to Gord's Bar in Watkins, just blocks from the Ertl family's home. Even more convenient, Matt's wife Kayla joined them there. Anderson ordered several vodka Red Bulls and bought drinks for the group. At 2 a.m., as required by state law, the bar closed. Kayla went home first, arriving around 2 o'clock. She checked on Elena, tucked her in with her beloved pink Princess Elsa blanket, the same one she always slept with. It would be the last time anyone except Anderson ever saw her alive. Matt got home around 2:30. Anderson showed up about an hour later, between 3:30 and 3:45. That detail matters. It wasn't unusual for him to stay over. Sheriff Brian Cruz would later clarify, "Our suspect is a family friend, a coworker of the victim's father, and had stayed at the house before." That familiarity was key. Anderson wasn't a stranger. He'd stayed over before. He knew the house, the layout, where everyone slept. Matt and Anderson likely talked until about 4 a.m. Matt, tired from work and the game, went to bed, trusting his friend to crash as usual. But Anderson stayed awake. Between 4 o'clock and 8 a.m., Saturday, August 20th, Zachary Anderson entered Elena's room, wrapped her in her pink frozen blanket, and carried her out of the house. He also took the keys to Matt's 2002 GMC Sierra and, crucially, Matt's cell phone, which was inside the truck. When Matt and Kayla woke up sometime between 8 o'clock and 8:30 that morning, they found their world turned upside down. Elena was gone. Anderson was gone. The truck was gone. And a nightmare was beginning. Imagine waking up in your home, in the town where you've always lived, surrounded by people you trust, only to discover that your 5-year-old daughter is missing. She's not in another room, not hiding, not at a friend's house, just gone. And the man you trusted, the one you spent the night out with, your friend, is missing too, along with your vehicle. That's what Matt and Kayla woke up to that Saturday morning. At first, there's always confusion, then concern, then panic, then something deeper, terror. They checked every room, called her name, went outside, called Matt's phone, hoping for a simple mistake, a misunderstanding. But the call went straight to voicemail. The phone was in the truck. And that truck, at that moment, was already 80 to 100 miles away, heading north through rural Minnesota. By 10 a.m., they had called the Meeker County Sheriff's Office to report Elena missing. The response started like any missing child case. Gather details, last known sightings, contacts. But this wasn't typical, and authorities knew that immediately. A 5-year-old doesn't just vanish. A family friend doesn't just leave with someone's child. And there was the cell phone. Modern technology can both help and haunt. Because Matt's phone was in the truck, it could be tracked, and that meant they could also track Anderson. At 6:30 that morning, before Matt and Kayla even knew anything was wrong, the phone had pinned off a tower in Todd County, farther north toward Minnesota's lake country and wilderness. Then, at 8:30 a.m., something critical happened. Zachary Anderson was spotted, alone, at a convenience store near Browerville, Minnesota, a tiny town in Todd County with just over 700 residents. The kind of place with one gas station, one convenience store. A place where strangers don't go unnoticed. So when Zachary Anderson showed up alone at the local store that morning, it stood out. There was no sign of Elena, but this confirmed he had the truck. Confirmed he was heading north. And it raised a terrifying question. Where was Elena? At 9 a.m., Matt's phone pinged one final time in Todd County. Then, it was turned off. This was no accident. Anderson knew he could be tracked. Turning off the phone wasn't panic. It was calculated. He knew what he was doing. He wasn't confused. He was avoiding capture. By 10 a.m., when Matt and Kayla reported Elena missing, Anderson had already been gone for 6 hours. The trail was growing cold. The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, the state's major crime unit, joined immediately. This wasn't just a local sheriff's case anymore. This required coordination across counties. Resources, urgency. At 1:12 p.m., the case escalated statewide. A Minnesota Amber Alert was issued for 5-year-old Elena Xener and 25-year-old Zachary Todd Anderson. Suddenly, this wasn't just a tragedy for Watkins or Meeker County. Elena's photo and Anderson's description were now on every phone, every TV screen, every highway sign. The alert described Elena as 5 years old, 3 feet 6 inches tall, about 45 pounds, with brown eyes and shoulder-length blonde hair. She was last seen wearing a pink nightgown and had been taken by a family acquaintance. Anderson was listed as 5'10", around 200 pounds, dark hair, shaggy beard, driving a 2002 gray GMC Sierra with Minnesota plates. The alert also noted he was believed to be in the Alexandria area, which aligned with the phone pings and his path north. Alexandria, with its lakes and summer cabins, is a popular getaway spot. But behind the scenes, investigators had a crucial lead, one they hadn't shared publicly yet. Around 2 o'clock that afternoon, as the alert spread across the state and law enforcement mobilized in full force, a phone rang at the Cass County Sheriff's Office. The caller was Zachary Anderson's father. Now pause for a moment. Imagine being in his shoes. You've seen the Amber Alert, your son's name, the face of a missing child. You know your son has access to your cabin, remote, isolated, and now you have a decision to make. Stay silent and hope for the best? Or call the police? Anderson's father did the right thing. Though his name was never made public, his actions may have changed everything. He told deputies his son had contacted him earlier asking to use the family's remote cabin in Cass County. And he didn't just confirm it. He gave full permission to search the property. He provided an exact address, 4926 Iroquois Trail Loop SW in Wilderness Park Estates, Meadowbrook Township. No guesswork. No delays. Just precise information. The cabin sat roughly 80 to 100 miles north of Watkins, deep in one of the most remote parts of central Minnesota. Wilderness Park Estates isn't a neighborhood. It's a scattered collection of small cabins and trailers hidden among trees and marsh. A place people go to be alone, sometimes to disappear. The surrounding terrain included dense woods, swamps, and a steep ravine. Adjacent to the property was the Meadowbrook Wildlife Management Area, thousands of acres of rugged wetlands, thick forests, and wildlife. Even seasoned outdoorsmen can struggle out there. This is where Zachary Anderson had taken Elena, a remote cabin. Deep in the wilderness. Far from neighbors, far from help, and far from any chance of someone stumbling upon them. Between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock that afternoon, multiple teams of law enforcement officers were dispatched to the cabin. The first team to arrive found something that instantly shifted the case. This was no longer just a missing child report. It had become an active crime scene. Matt's stolen 2002 GMC Sierra was there, hidden deep in a ravine, out of view from anyone passing by. This wasn't someone stopping by a cabin. This was someone trying to hide. Inside the cabin, officers found a 20-gauge shotgun on the kitchen table. Ammo was scattered nearby. A handwritten suicide note lay beside it, with blood smeared on one corner. Anderson had clearly considered taking his own life. But what no one knew yet was whether he had already taken Elena's. The truck keys were also inside, confirming Anderson had been there. But Anderson himself was gone. A second team of officers arrived at the scene. This group included a specialized canine unit, a crucial addition. The handler was Deputy Bill Connor. His partner? A German shepherd named Yankee, soon to become a name known across Minnesota. Yankee had been trained extensively by Steve Pearson in tracking and search and rescue. He could follow scent trails through difficult terrain and stay focused in even the worst conditions. But the challenge Yankee faced on August 20, 2016 was unlike any other. Typically, a tracking dog needs a scent article, something personal like a shirt or toy, to identify the person's trail. But the officers at the cabin had nothing. No clothes of Elena's, nothing belonging to Anderson. Just dense woods, swampland, and an armed, potentially suicidal man somewhere nearby. A helicopter equipped with infrared was also launched to scan from above. But it turned up nothing. Trainer Steve Pearson later offered a theory. Yankee wasn't tracking a scent article. He was tracking fear. Yes, fear has a scent. When someone's afraid, the body releases adrenaline, cortisol, and other stress chemicals that alter how you smell. Trained dogs like Yankee can detect those changes. Yankee picked up a trail from the cabin into the swamp. He followed faint footprints through flooded brush and unstable ground. This wasn't a hiking path. This was real wilderness, deep wetland, thick undergrowth, uneven terrain. A place where even someone 50 feet away could remain completely unseen. Deputy Connor followed Yankee closely, trusting him fully. The search took time that felt like an eternity. And then, sometime around 4:25 p.m., Yankee led them to a figure standing knee-deep in swamp water. It was Zachary Todd Anderson. Roughly a quarter-mile from the cabin, he stood alone, soaked, and silent. He had fresh cuts on his wrist, clear signs of a suicide attempt, but he was unarmed. He didn't run, didn't fight, just stood there quietly, surrounded by armed officers. The first question came quickly. "Where's Elena?" Anderson's answer was chilling. "What girl?" This wasn't confusion. It wasn't shock. It was a calculated response, a refusal to acknowledge. The girl whose face had been plastered across every phone and TV in Minnesota. Officers pushed him again. Anderson responded by invoking his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. Not once. Not twice. But 3 separate times. It's important to understand what that means. Under the U.S. Constitution, once a person invokes their right to remain silent, questioning must stop. It's not a technicality, it's a core protection to prevent forced confessions. But officers continued pressing him. Before we rush to judgment, consider the pressure they were under. A 5-year-old child was missing. They were in the middle of nowhere, and the only person who knew her location was standing silently in the water, refusing to speak. Predators often don't look like the people we fear. They look like friends. They blend in. They earn trust. They become the coworker who helps you out, the teammate who buys the next round, the guy who stays on your couch after a late night. A relative of Elena's family explained it simply. Anderson always had a story. We never had a reason to question him. And then came the question they now ask themselves over and over. How do you know when to trust someone? And when you shouldn't? There's no easy answer. Without trust, communities fall apart. Friendships crumble. And small towns like Watkins simply don't function. But trust also carries risk, and sometimes the people we let closest are the ones capable of the deepest harm. The investigation into what happened between 4 a.m. and 6:02 p.m. became a massive multi-agency effort. The Meeker County Sheriff's Office led the case since Elena was taken from her home. The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension provided agents and forensic support. The Cass County Sheriff handled the remote cabin crime scene. The Todd County Sheriff tracked phone pings. The Crow Wing County Jail booked Anderson. The Minnesota State Patrol and even the FBI were consulted. For many of these officers, this wasn't just another case. Some had helped after the tornado a month earlier. Some had kids Elena's age. Some knew the family personally. They weren't just solving a crime. They were trying to understand how something so horrific could happen in their own backyard. Steve Pearson, the canine trainer who worked with Yankee, later explained just how close Anderson was to disappearing forever. When officers reached the cabin, they had no idea where to start. I have no doubt he would have gotten away without Yankee's help. And he was right. If Anderson's father hadn't called, if Yankee hadn't caught the scent, if any single moment had played out differently, Anderson might have died by suicide in that swamp. And Elena might not have been found for days or at all. Her family may never have had answers, but there was still one more disturbing piece. Investigators were about to uncover proof that what happened to Elena was not Anderson's first act of predatory behavior, just the first that ended in tragedy. After Anderson's arrest, reporters searched through old public records, hidden in Wright County juvenile files from nearly a decade earlier. They found a felony case from when Anderson was a teenager, because he was over 16 when he committed a felony. Minnesota law made those records public, but they'd never made news. They'd never brought major consequences, and nobody ever flagged him as a danger to children. The first sign came in May 2006. Anderson was 15, living with his mother in a townhouse complex in Monticello. Next door lived a 31-year-old single mother with 2 young kids. Anderson began leaving what she described as love notes on her windshield, handwritten messages saying she was pretty and asking if she wanted him to be his girlfriend. It felt like an awkward teenage crush. Strange, yes, but not dangerous. She also suspected him of stealing cigarettes from her garage, but had no proof. Then things escalated. In December 2006, now 16 years old, Anderson showed up at her door at 1:30 in the morning wearing only boxer shorts. He pounded on the door, demanding sex. According to her police statement, he said things like, "Come on, open the door. You know you want to." Her boyfriend came downstairs and Anderson ran. This wasn't teenage confusion anymore. This was aggressive behavior and deeply inappropriate. But it didn't end there. In June 2007, while the woman and her children were asleep upstairs, Anderson removed a window screen, broke into their home, and stole her cell phone. He had entered a home where a mother and 2 children were sleeping, violating safety, privacy, and trust. He committed burglary, yes, but far more alarming was his willingness to enter a home uninvited and take what he wanted. He was charged with first-degree burglary and theft. In a plea deal, he pleaded guilty to third-degree burglary. His sentence? Community service and an apology letter. The woman later told reporters the apology letter Anderson wrote was barely 2 sentences long. She said she was so frightened after the incident that she moved out of Monticello altogether. Yet Anderson faced almost no real consequences, no jail time, no treatment requirements, no placement on any registry, and no system warning that could have protected someone in the future. When she learned what happened to Elena in 2016, she spoke to WCCO, saying she did so in hopes that others who'd encountered Anderson would come forward. Her words were haunting. It's hard to believe he didn't target anyone else in those 10 years. And the pattern is painfully clear. At 15, unwanted notes toward an adult neighbor. At 16, showing up at her door nearly unclothed, demanding sexual attention. At 16, breaking into her home while her children slept. At 25, abducting, assaulting, and killing a 5-year-old girl. This is escalation. This is a trajectory professionals often see in predatory offenders. And it had been documented sitting in public records, yet it never flagged Anderson as a threat. No one connected the dots. And nearly a decade later, he was still welcomed into a home with a sleeping child. Sheriff Brian Cruz's statement takes on new weight. We have no known predatory sexual offender information on him. That was technically true. Anderson wasn't on any registry. He had no adult criminal record. His juvenile burglary conviction didn't categorize him as dangerous. But the pattern was there. It just wasn't recognized. The Ramsey County medical examiner conducted Elena's autopsy. On August 21, 2016, they released a preliminary report listing her manner of death as homicidal violence, a term used before full results are completed, but confirming that her death was not accidental or natural. When the final findings came out, officials shared them carefully. I will present them here in the most responsible, age-appropriate, and monetization-safe way possible. The autopsy found that Elena died from strangulation and blunt force trauma, and that there was evidence of criminal sexual conduct, the legal term used in Minnesota for the offenses committed. These details told investigators 3 important things. First, Elena suffered a violent attack with more than one method involved. Second, the presence of criminal sexual conduct confirmed this was a sexually motivated crime against a child, among the most serious charges in Minnesota law. Third, the forensic evidence, combined with Anderson's actions and the crime scene itself, would form a strong case for prosecutors. But for the family, the autopsy wasn't about legal strategy. It was confirmation of their worst reality. Their daughter had suffered at the hands of someone they trusted completely. The little girl who gave everyone morning kisses, who loved animals and princesses, who lit up every room, had been taken from her sleep and harmed in ways no child should ever endure. Trusted friend had driven her nearly 100 miles from home, committed unimaginable acts, and tried to hide what he had done. And now the focus shifted to justice. On August 23, 2016, 3 days after Elena was found, Zachary Todd Anderson appeared in Cass County District Court for the first time. Judge David Harrington presided. Those who were in the courtroom noted Anderson's expressionless demeanor. He spoke only a few words. He showed no emotion. This mattered. Defendants in cases like this often display something: remorse, fear, anger, or even shock. But Anderson showed nothing. No sadness, no regret, no outward sign that he grasped the gravity of what he had done. The initial charges filed against him were 1 count of second-degree murder, 2 counts of first-degree criminal sexual conduct, 2 counts of kidnapping, 1 count of motor vehicle theft, and this was only the beginning of a long legal process ahead. These first charges were filed quickly, just enough to keep Anderson in custody while investigators gathered the full picture. More charges were expected once a grand jury reviewed the evidence. Bail was set at $2 million unconditional or $1 million with conditions, making it all but impossible for Anderson to be released. No judge would risk it, not with the nature of the case. A public defender, Scott Collins from Thief River Falls, was appointed to represent him. Under Minnesota law, every defendant, even those accused of the worst possible crimes, has the right to legal representation. It isn't popular, especially when the case involves a murdered child. but it's a protection that keeps the justice system functioning fairly. Anderson entered a not guilty plea, which is standard at an initial appearance. Few defendants plead guilty on day one. Early hearings are about acknowledging the charges and beginning the legal process. Still, everyone in the courtroom knew this case was unlike anything their community had faced. The evidence was overwhelming. The crime was horrifying. And the entire region was paying attention. While the legal wheels began to turn, Watkins was struggling to process the unthinkable. On the evening of August 23, 2016, the same day Anderson appeared in court, a candlelight vigil was held outside St. Anthony Catholic Church, directly across from the family's home. The turnout was extraordinary. Hundreds attended. Some estimates said nearly 1,000 people. Essentially the whole town and residents from neighboring communities. People arrived wearing pink and purple, Elena's favorite colors, many bringing their children along. Reverend Aaron Nett led prayers and readings. A large screen showed photos of Elena from infancy to age 5. Her bright eyes, her constant smile, the happiness she radiated. Matt and Kayla lit the first candle. Soon, hundreds of tiny flames flickered across the parking lot, each representing a life touched by this little girl. Children released pink and purple balloons into the sky. The crowd sang "Let It Go" from Frozen, the movie Elena adored. Reverend Nett's message captured the heart of the tragedy. Today, we remember a little girl who was given to us as a gift. Her love for others was free and innocent. Church Secretary Jesse Thischer tried to estimate the crowd. It might be 1,000. We really don't know. It's just a terrible thing. Parent Nicole Olshide said the tragedy struck even harder now that she had a daughter of her own. It really touched home. When the vigil ended, few people left right away. Families stood together in the warm evening, hugging, crying, trying to support one another. No one knew what to say. There were no words that made sense of any of it. A memorial soon formed outside the Ertl home. Angel figurines appeared on the steps. Flowers were placed near the door. Cards and handwritten messages were tucked into the railing. Over the following days and weeks, the memorial grew, gifts arriving from across Minnesota and even other states. People who had never met Elena felt compelled to reach out, to send prayers, to say they hugged their own children a little tighter. Many strangers wrote that. Elena's story reminded them to slow down and be more patient parents, not to take time with their kids for granted. A GoFundMe was launched on August 21st to help the family with funeral costs and immediate needs. The goal was $10,000. Within 8 hours, donations reached $14,000. Within 2 days, the total passed $40,000. By the time the campaign closed, more than $49,000 had been raised by people wanting to help in the only way they could. The Hurl family had already been recovering from tornado damage just weeks earlier. Now they were preparing for their daughter's funeral. The community's financial support was practical, but it also served as a shared expression of grief, love, and unity. Tom Ertl, who ran the local funeral home and was distantly related to the family, handled the arrangements. Speaking to reporters, he captured the raw emotion everyone felt. It's been hell. This is senseless. There are no words. He was right. There were no words. On Thursday, August 25, 2016, visitation was held at the funeral home on Church Street in Watkins. It lasted from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. The line of mourners stretched out the door and down the block. At 8 p.m., parish prayers were held. These charges were only the beginning, filed quickly to ensure Anderson stayed in custody. While investigators continued building the case, more charges would come once a grand jury reviewed everything. His bail was set at $2 million unconditional. or $1 million with strict conditions, making it essentially impossible for him to be released. No judge was going to risk letting him out, not with the seriousness of the allegations. A public defender, Scott Collins from Thief River Falls, was appointed to represent Anderson. In Minnesota, even those accused of the worst crimes are entitled to legal counsel. It's a principle designed to protect the fairness of the justice system. Even when the defendant's actions spark outrage. At his first hearing, Anderson entered a not guilty plea standard procedure at this stage. The initial appearance isn't about admitting guilt. It's about acknowledging charges and beginning the legal process. But everyone in that courtroom, judges, lawyers, reporters, and the few community members allowed inside, knew this would be an extraordinary case. The evidence was strong. The crime was horrific. And an entire community was watching. While the legal wheels began turning, Watkins tried to process the unthinkable. On the evening of August 23rd, the same day Anderson appeared in court, a candlelight vigil was held in the parking lot of St. Anthony Catholic Church right across from the family home. The turnout was overwhelming. Hundreds gathered, some estimates suggesting almost 1,000 people. Nearly the entire town, along with many from nearby communities. They came carrying candles, wearing pink and purple, Elena's favorite colors, bringing their children, holding each other. Reverend Aaron Nett led the vigil, joined by community members offering prayers, readings, and hymns. A large screen displayed photos of Elena from a newborn to the bright 5-year-old everyone loved. Matt and Kayla lit the first candles, and soon countless small flames glowed in the darkness. Pink and purple balloons were released into the sky. And then, in a moment no one who attended will ever forget, the crowd softly sang, "You Are My Sunshine," Elena's sun song. Reverend Nett spoke of a child who loved freely and brightly. "A beautiful girl given to us as a gift," he said. Her love for others was free and innocent. Church staff described the turnout as unlike anything they'd ever seen. Parents said they felt the loss deeply, imagining their own children. People gathered long after the vigil ended, standing in small groups, crying, holding hands, trying to comfort each other. At the Ertl home, a memorial grew day by day. Angel figurines, flowers, letters, drawings, toys, and heartfelt notes. Messages arrived from across Minnesota and even from other states, people promising to be more patient with their children, more present, more grateful for the time they have. A GoFundMe created on August 21st had an initial goal of $10,000. Within 8 hours, donations reached $14,000. Within 2 days, the total passed $40,000. By the time the campaign closed, more than $49,000 had been raised to help the family through funeral costs and the upheaval of their lives. The family had already been recovering from tornado damage a month earlier. Now they were facing something far worse. The community's financial help couldn't erase the pain, but it was a powerful gesture of solidarity. Tom Ertl, who ran the local funeral home and was distantly related to the family, said quietly, "It's been hell, senseless. There are no words." And there truly weren't. August 26th, funeral day visitation resumed at 9 a.m. on Friday. August 26th at 10:30, Elena's funeral began at St. Anthony Catholic Church. The church was completely full, standing room only. People crowded the balcony, the aisles, the back walls. Family filled the front pews. Reverend Aaron Nett and Father Bob Rolfs led the service, with music from Kathy Pauls. Before anything officially began, something extraordinary happened. The entire church sang, "You Are My Sunshine," a cappella. Hundreds of voices joined together, singing Elena's favorite song. And as they sang, her tiny white coffin was brought inside. A child's coffin is shockingly small, its size. a painful reminder of all the moments that will never come. Her family included a message in the funeral pamphlet. "We love you more than anything, baby girl. Please watch over us. Dance your heart out, Peanut." Reverend Nett's sermon tried to speak to the questions weighing on every heart. Why her? Why here? Why this way? Questions without answers. He acknowledged the heavy string of tragedies the town had endured, the tornado, the past year's crash, and now the loss of a child. After the service, Elena was laid to rest in St. Anthony Catholic Cemetery. A community meal followed at the town hall, where hundreds gathered to share stories and memories of a little girl who brought joy wherever she went. Kayla Ertl spoke briefly. "You think you know someone. You trust them. You welcome them into your home. And then they turn their back on you in a way you can never understand. How do you explain this to an 8-year-old brother? How do you stay in the home where it happened? How do you walk through a town where everyone knows your pain?" There are no simple answers. Only the reality that life had changed forever. Cass County Attorney Benjamin Lindstrom said it plainly. It's never going to be over for them. They don't have Elena anymore. The funeral wasn't closure. It was the start of a long path toward justice. For over a year, the legal case moved slowly: motions, evidence review, filings. And then on October 25, 2017, a grand jury returned a sweeping indictment. 8 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of second-degree intentional murder, 2 counts of first-degree criminal sexual conduct, 2 counts of second-degree criminal sexual conduct, 4 counts of kidnapping, 2 counts of interference with a dead body, 1 count of motor vehicle theft, 19 charges in total, each representing a different piece of what happened that night, each carrying its own potential sentence. Each charge represented a different legal path the prosecution could use to prove Anderson guilty of the highest level of murder. Anderson initially entered a not guilty plea to all counts. This was expected. Early in a case, the defense reviews evidence, considers strategy, and decides whether to head toward trial or negotiate a plea. But from the start, the evidence against Anderson was overwhelming. There was the canine tracking his scent into the swamp. There were the cell phone pings showing the path of the stolen truck. There was his father's statement about the call asking to use the cabin. There was the hidden truck, the suicide note, the shotgun, and the cabin evidence. There were the autopsy findings, and most importantly, there was Anderson's own statement in the swamp leading officers to Elena's body. But that final piece of evidence was about to become legally complicated. On March 24, 2017, Scott Collins, Anderson's defense attorney, filed several motions challenging key parts of the case. These included a claim of insufficient probable cause, a request to suppress evidence, a motion arguing Anderson's constitutional rights were violated, and a request to move the trial to a different county. The most serious of these was the constitutional challenge. Collins argued that Anderson's Fifth Amendment rights were violated because investigators continued questioning him after he invoked his right to remain silent 3 times. Under the law, questioning should have stopped immediately. But officers, desperate to find Elena and hoping she might still be alive, continued talking to him. Judge Jana M. Osted presided over the suppression hearing in June 2017. The defense argued that anything Anderson said after invoking his rights, including the moment he said, "in the swamp," and led officers to her body, should be excluded. Without that statement, the prosecution couldn't tell the jury how the body was found, which would weaken their narrative. The prosecution argued officers were acting in good faith under emergency circumstances, trying to save a child's life, and that Anderson's final response was voluntary, not coerced. Judge Osted faced an agonizing decision: balance the rights of the accused with the need for justice in the murder of a child. Her ruling came in June 2017. She agreed Anderson's rights had been violated. His statement in the swamp and the fact that he led officers to the body would be inadmissible at trial. It was a major win for the defense. But it did not derail the case. Judge Osted did not dismiss the charges. The indictment remained intact. The case would move forward. The prosecution simply had to proceed without using Anderson's initial statement. And they still had plenty. The phone tracking the stolen truck. At the cabin, the physical and forensic evidence Anderson's. Opportunity and connection to the family. The overwhelming circumstantial timeline even without his words. The case remained strong. The ruling was a reminder that the Constitution applies even in the darkest moments, and that law enforcement must follow those rules no matter how desperate the situation. But the suppression wasn't going to save Zachary Anderson. Both sides now understood the landscape. The prosecution had a powerful, though not flawless, case. The defense had earned a procedural victory, but their client still faced life in prison. A trial date was set. Jury selection approached. And then, on March 2, 2018, everything changed. Zachary Todd Anderson unexpectedly chose to plead guilty. The hearing took place in Cass County District Court in Walker, Minnesota. Judge Jana Osted presided. Kip Fontaine, a public defender, represented Anderson. Cass County Attorney Benjamin Lindstrom represented the state. Anderson pleaded guilty to first-degree murder while committing first-degree criminal sexual conduct, the most severe charge in Minnesota law. It carries a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. No parole hearings. No early release. No second chance. Life meant life. With the plea, the remaining 18 charges were dismissed. They no longer mattered. The most serious charge alone guaranteed he would never walk free again. In an open court, Anderson was required to allocute, meaning he had to stand up and verbally admit what he did. With multiple members of Elena's family sitting only a few feet away, Anderson stated that he kidnapped her from her home, sexually assaulted her, and left her in the swamp in Cass County. Reporters noted that family members became emotional as he spoke. And how could they not? Imagine the strength it takes to sit in that courtroom and listen quietly while the man who killed your child describes his actions. Not shouting, not lunging across the room. Just listening, because that is what seeking justice requires. Several relatives gave victim impact statements. Their words were not made public, but it isn't hard to imagine the pain, anger, and grief they carried into that courtroom. Judge Osted then imposed the mandatory sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the hearing, Cass County Attorney Benjamin Lindstrom addressed reporters. His tone reflected both a sense of justice and the impossibility of true closure. Our goal was the maximum sentence, life without release. That is what this plea accomplished. This doesn't make it right, but it's the most the law allows. Lindstrom admitted he was surprised Anderson chose to plead guilty. He had no incentive to do it. The outcome would have been the same after trial. This detail is important. Anderson had nothing to gain by pleading guilty. With or without the suppressed statement, the evidence against him was overwhelming. The prosecution made it clear they would not offer a lighter sentence. So why did he plead guilty? We can only speculate. Perhaps he wanted to avoid a long trial and the public detailing of every part of his crime. Perhaps his attorneys advised him that fighting the charges was pointless. Perhaps, though unlikely, he wanted to spare the family further trauma. Or, as Lindstrom suggested, the state's case was so strong that even Anderson saw no path forward. What his plea did accomplish was one thing. It spared the family from a multi-week trial with painful testimony, forensic details, and repeated exposure to evidence they had already endured once. On March 2, 2018, Almost 18 months after Elena's death, Zachary Todd Anderson was sentenced to spend the rest of his life in a Minnesota state prison. He will never be released. Is that justice? Some people believe so. Others feel that no punishment could ever match what happened. But legally, it was the maximum allowed. And sometimes, in a system bound by laws and limits, that has to be enough. After sentencing, Watkins was left with questions that had no clear answers. How did this happen? How did a man with a documented history of predatory behavior toward women, toward private homes, toward boundaries, end up trusted enough to sleep in a house with a young child? Where did the system fail? The answer is layered. First, the 2006-2007 case. When 16-year-old Anderson broke into a neighbor's home, he was charged with first-degree burglary, a felony that can carry up to 20 years in prison. But he took a plea to third-degree burglary, served community service, and wrote an apology letter. No jail time. No registration. No follow-up supervision. No red flag in the system that would warn future employers or families. Could it have been handled differently? Absolutely. But prosecutors in juvenile cases often balance consequence with rehabilitation. On paper, Anderson looked like a teenager who made a bad choice, not someone capable of future violence. At the time, no one knew what he would become. Second, the question of what Matt and Kayla knew. Did they know Anderson had a juvenile burglary conviction? It's unclear. He may never have mentioned it. Or Matt may have known but dismissed it as a minor, years-old mistake from someone who otherwise seemed trustworthy. Anderson had no adult criminal record. Nothing on paper suggested danger. Third, the issue of trust itself, especially in small towns. Communities like Watkins rely on trust. People rely on each other. They share rides, meals, and homes. They don't expect betrayal from the people they see every day. And that sense of safety, the very thing that makes small-town life special, can also make people vulnerable to hidden dangers. These failures, legal, informational, emotional, intersected in the worst possible way, and the result was the loss of a 5-year-old girl. In a town of 1,000 people. Life depends on trust. You can't survive if you assume every neighbor is a danger. The familiarity, the closeness, the comfort, all the things that make small towns feel safe are the same things predators quietly take advantage of. Sheriff Brian Cruz acknowledged this openly. We have no known motive. We are at a loss as to why this happened. Even investigators, with access to records and databases, couldn't have predicted what Anderson would eventually do. He wasn't on any registry. He had no adult criminal history beyond traffic violations. On paper, he looked like anyone else in Watkins, but there was a warning, the 2006-2007 case. Unwanted advances, sexual demands, breaking into a home while a family slept. These behaviors should have raised alarms. Yet juvenile records fade with time, and in small communities, people tend to believe the best about those around them. Nearly 10 years later, that same boy had become a trusted family friend. A relative of the Oral family captured the haunting dilemma. Where's the line when you know when to trust somebody or not? It's a question with no clear answer. We can do background checks, look for red flags, pay attention to behavior, but trust always involves risk. If we never trust anyone, life becomes fear and isolation. But trust also requires vulnerability, and sometimes that vulnerability is exploited in the worst ways. So what do? We stay aware. We don't dismiss warning signs. We remember that when someone shows us concerning behavior, even years earlier, it matters. And we expect our systems, legal, social, investigative, to recognize patterns and connect the dots. Would any of this have saved Elena? We'll never know. But honoring her memory means trying to prevent the next tragedy. Despite unimaginable grief, Matt and Kayla made a choice. They refused to let anger consume them. They refused to let Elena's life be defined only by what was taken from her. Instead, they chose to honor who she was, a loving, joyful child who cared deeply for others. On October 31, 2016, what would have been Elena's 6th birthday, Kayla hosted a public celebration in her daughter's honor. The turnout was overwhelming. Watkins came together again, bringing donations, hugs, and support. From that day, a movement began, Sharing Elena's Love, a charitable effort to help sick children and families in need. The charity now holds 2 major events each year. 1. Elena's Halloween birthday party held on the Saturday closest to October 31st. It's a free community celebration with games, bounce houses, music, and activities. Attendees bring toy or monetary donations, which are then given to pediatric patients at St. Cloud Hospital and to families in the Litchfield area experiencing hardship. 2. The Elena Oral Memorial Run held every August. This event brings together a TV riders, motorcyclists, car enthusiasts, and community members. Starting from Riverside Tavern, owned by Elena's grandparents, Rick and Kim, hundreds join the ride each year. Proceeds fund the birthday event and support families who need extra care and kindness. On the charity's website, there's a simple question: who is Elena? The answer reads, Elena is a daughter and a loving sister. She was abducted on August 20, 2016. Her life was taken. She became an angel. She loved helping others, loved her family, and loved animals. She had a contagious smile and big brown eyes. Elena was put here to show us how to love. The website encourages people to carry on her spirit. Attend the memorial run. Donate. Celebrate her birthday. Be kind. Be caring. Snuggle an animal. Those last 3 reflect exactly who Elena was. Simple, gentle acts, the kind that make the world a little easier for someone else. The kind of acts a child naturally offers without thinking. Since 2016, the charity has donated thousands of toys and helped countless families. They've turned October 31st from a day of grief into a day of giving. Kayla has said that the charity keeps her connected to Elena, that it gives purpose to the pain and allows Elena's spirit to continue touching lives. Even though she is no longer here. And in September 2023, 7 years after her passing, Watkins unveiled a permanent memorial, a life-size statue of Elena in McCarthy Park. The project took 2 years and brought together several local businesses. The statue stands as a lasting tribute to a little girl whose life was short but enormously impactful. A reminder of love. A reminder of community. A reminder of a child whose kindness continues to ripple outward. This is how a community heals, not by forgetting, and not by trying to move on as if nothing happened, but by remembering, honoring, and choosing to create something good in the middle of heartbreak. Elena's legacy is not defined only by the way her life ended, but by the way she lived. And through the charity created in her name, that legacy continues to spread. Zachary Todd Anderson is now serving a life without parole sentence in a Minnesota state prison. Under state law, that sentence is absolute. He will never be released. He will spend the rest of his life behind bars. He is only in his early 30s now, meaning he may spend another 40 or 50 years waking up in a prison cell. Years filled with the knowledge of what he did and the pain he caused. Is that punishment enough? For the Ertl family, probably not. No legal outcome could ever balance what was taken from them. But it is the strongest sentence the law allows, and sometimes that must be enough. Matt and Kayla still live in Watkins. They continue running Sharing Elena's Love. They parent their surviving son, Carter, now a teenager. They worship at St. Anthony Catholic Church. They see neighbors who supported them through their darkest days. Their lives will always carry the weight of losing Elena. Every birthday, every holiday, every milestone Carter reaches comes with the quiet ache of knowing Elena will never experience them. But they continue forward. They find purpose in keeping her memory alive. Watkins, too, has moved forward. The town rebuilt after the tornado. Families celebrated weddings and graduations. Babies were born. Life didn't stop, but it changed. Parents became more cautious. Families thought more carefully about trust. And the innocence that once defined small-town life was replaced with a softer, more aware understanding that danger can hide behind a familiar smile. The woman Anderson targeted in 2006 and 2007 has not spoken publicly since her interview shortly after Elena's death. One hopes she has found peace and that she knows she holds no responsibility for what happened. She did what she could. She came forward, reported him, and pressed charges. It was the system that failed to see the danger. K9 Yankee, the German shepherd who tracked Anderson through the swamp, has since retired. His handler, Deputy Bill Connor, often speaks about the importance of K9 units in search operations. Yankees trainer Steve Pearson continues working with police dogs, teaching skills that can change and save lives. Sheriff Brian Cruz remains the Meeker County Sheriff. He has handled many cases since 2016, but it's hard to imagine he ever forgets this one. The same is true for the officers and investigators who worked those 8 desperate hours trying to find Elena. Cass County Attorney Benjamin Lindstrom, who prosecuted Anderson, continues to serve in the county attorney's office. His words, "We will do everything the law allows to protect our children," still guide his work. Judge Jana Osted, who made the difficult Fifth Amendment ruling and later sentenced Anderson, continues serving on the bench, balancing constitutional rights with the pursuit of justice. And Elena Ertl remains forever 5 years old, remembered by her family, cherished by the community, and held in the hearts of thousands of people who never met her but were deeply moved by her story. What can we take from this case? What lessons might prevent future tragedies? First, juvenile offenses involving patterns of sexual aggression or boundary violations must be taken more seriously. Zachary Anderson's actions at 15 and 16 showed clear warning signs. The fact that he received only community service for breaking into a woman's home while she and her children slept was a failure of the justice system. This doesn't mean teenagers should be punished without mercy. But certain behaviors, sexual aggression, fixation on vulnerable victims, intrusion into homes should trigger stronger interventions, treatment, and long-term monitoring. Second, we need better systems to flag individuals who show patterns across multiple incidents. Anderson's behavior repeated over more than a year with the same victim. That alone should have raised concern. Better communication between agencies and better tracking tools might help prevent future tragedies. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was an escalating pattern, and the system didn't respond strongly enough. Third, communities need better awareness of grooming behavior. Anderson wasn't a stranger hiding in the dark. He was a trusted friend, exactly the type of person who gains access through familiarity. Most child abuse is committed not by outsiders, but by adults who seem helpful, friendly, and reliable. They volunteer for activities, build relationships with parents, and slowly work themselves into the trust of a family. That trust becomes the cover they need. Fourth, we must stop assuming small towns are automatically safer. The belief that it can't happen here is dangerous. It can happen anywhere: city, suburb, or rural community. In small towns, trust networks are tighter, which unfortunately can make it easier for predators to go unnoticed. Fifth, we need to support victims who report early warning signs. The woman Anderson targeted in 2006 tried to warn people after Elena's death. Victims often hesitate to report minor or early incidents, fearing backlash or disbelief. Communities must create safe, supportive avenues for people to speak up. 6. We must accept that constitutional protections exist even for people accused of terrible crimes. Judge Osted's ruling that Anderson's Fifth Amendment rights were violated angered many. But constitutional rights don't vanish during emergencies. They apply to everyone in every case, because the alternative, allowing police to ignore rights at their discretion, is far more dangerous in the long run. 7th. Communities need support when tragedy strikes. Watkins endured a fatal crash, a tornado, and then Elena's murder, 3 devastating events in close succession. The emotional weight on a small town can be overwhelming. Thoughtful community rituals, vigils, funerals, public gatherings help people process trauma and move forward. Watkins showed how a community can hold each other through grief. 8th. We need to accept that some questions have no satisfying answers. We still don't know why Anderson did what he did. We don't have a clear motive. Could this have been prevented? Maybe, maybe not. Sometimes terrible acts come from places we can't understand, and we must learn to live with the discomfort of not knowing. Finally, we should support families who choose to create meaning from tragedy. Matt and Kayla could have withdrawn from the world. Instead, they built a charity that spreads kindness in their daughter's name. They turned Elena's birthday into a day of giving. They made sure her legacy would be about love, not violence. That kind of resilience is rare. It requires conscious effort and the strength to decide that evil will not define the narrative. Elena's story also highlights how effectively law enforcement acted under extreme pressure. Within 8 hours of the missing person report, officers located Anderson, found Elena, and secured the crime scene. This was not luck. It happened because agencies worked together, used resources wisely, and stayed focused on the mission. Let's look at what they did right. First, they took the missing child report seriously immediately. A 5-year-old doesn't simply wander off, especially when a family friend and a vehicle are missing. Officers recognized instantly that this was an emergency. Second, they coordinated seamlessly across jurisdictions. Meeker County didn't try to handle everything alone. They brought in the Minnesota BCA, worked with Todd County for the phone pings, cooperated with Cass County when the trail led north, and accepted help from state and federal agencies. In many investigations, jurisdictional conflict slows things down. In this case, everyone stayed aligned. Third, they used technology correctly. The phone pings through Todd County provided the critical direction. Anderson was traveling north, allowing investigators to narrow their search quickly. The Amber Alert mobilized thousands of people across Minnesota. Helicopters with infrared scanned the woods around the cabin. Officers followed every lead. And when Anderson's father called with information, they acted immediately. No hesitation. No waiting. They deployed units straight to the remote cabin. They also brought in the right resources at the right time. The K-9 team with Deputy Connor and Yankee was essential. Without Yankee's tracking ability, Anderson could have stayed hidden in the swamp for hours or even days. He may have taken his own life before revealing where he had left Elena. Their rapid response prevented that. Did investigators make mistakes? Yes. Continuing to question Anderson after he invoked his Fifth Amendment rights was a constitutional violation. Their desperation to find Elena is understandable, but the law is clear. Judge Osted later ruled that Anderson's initial statement, the one that led officers to the swamp, could not be used at trial, but that ruling ultimately strengthened the integrity of the case. It showed the justice system works even in emotional, high-pressure situations. Rights matter, even when the suspect is guilty of horrific crimes. And importantly, the suppressed statement didn't stop justice. Anderson still pled guilty. He still received the maximum sentence. The ruling ensured the case remained legally sound without altering the final outcome. Law enforcement across Minnesota learned from this. Departments updated training, reinforced the importance of respecting constitutional rights in emergencies, and improved procedures for child abduction cases. The role of K-9 units in wilderness searches was emphasized after Yankees' vital contribution. And behind all of this, officers carried the emotional toll. Sheriff Cruz acknowledged this when he said you could see the weight on their faces once they learned Elena had been found. Law enforcement officers are human. Many went home that night to children the same age as Elena. They carry memories from cases like hers for years. The public rarely sees that burden. Despite one misstep, the agencies involved acted with urgency and coordination. They found Anderson, located Elena, preserved evidence, and built a case strong enough to secure justice, all within 8 hours. Cass County Attorney Benjamin Lindstrom's prosecution also provides insight into how cases involving children should be handled. His decision shaped the outcome from the start. First, he filed every possible charge. The 19-count indictment wasn't excessive. It ensured that no matter which legal theory a jury accepted, Anderson would still face severe consequences. It also provided leverage if plea discussions ever arose. Second, Lindstrom refused to offer any deal that included a chance of parole. The charge Anderson ultimately pled guilty to: first-degree murder while committing first-degree criminal sexual conduct, carries a mandatory life sentence without release. Lindstrom accepted nothing less. His statement after sentencing made his philosophy clear. If people are going to hurt our kids, we will do everything we can by law to make it right. This is the most the law allows. In cases involving children, this is how prosecutors should operate. No compromises that allow dangerous offenders back into the community. Third, he accepted Anderson's guilty plea even though he believed a trial would have produced the same outcome. Some prosecutors insist on trials for the public record. But Lindstrom understood that a 3 to 4 week trial would force the family to relive the worst details in open court. He chose compassion over spectacle. It's never going to be over for them, he said. Sparing them additional trauma mattered more than courtroom drama. Fourth, he was candid about being surprised that Anderson pled guilty at all. Anderson had nothing to gain. The suppression ruling gave the defense some leverage, but the evidence remained overwhelming. Lindstrom didn't pretend this was a strategic victory. He simply acknowledged the truth. This honesty, paired with his resolve, helped bring closure without prolonging the family's suffering. He acknowledged that Anderson made a choice that ultimately helped the family, even though it offered him nothing in return. And that honesty mattered. Lindstrom didn't claim credit for forcing the plea or winning some legal strategy. He simply recognized that Anderson, for reasons we may never fully know, chose not to drag the family through a long trial. In every public statement, Lindstrom balanced relief that justice was served with the awareness that no legal outcome could make this right. He didn't boast or speak dramatically. He stated the facts, respected the process, and centered the family's pain. Prosecutors like Benjamin Lindstrom, who approach crimes against children without compromise, who handle victims with care, and who refuse to allow dangerous offenders any chance of returning to society, are exactly what the justice system needs. Not every prosecutor takes this approach. Not every case results in the maximum possible sentence. But in Elena's case, the system worked as it should. Judge Jana Osted also faced one of the most difficult responsibilities any judge can encounter: weighing constitutional rights against the urgent need for justice in a child murder case. Her ruling that Anderson's Fifth Amendment rights had been violated was legally correct but emotionally painful. She knew the decision would be controversial. She knew people would accuse her of protecting a killer's rights. But her ruling didn't diminish Elena's value. It upheld the principle that rights matter most in the hardest cases, the ones where emotions run high and the instinct is to ignore. Procedure. It's easy to honor constitutional rights when a defendant is sympathetic. It's far harder when the accused has done something horrific. But that's the point. If rights apply only when convenient, they aren't rights at all. Judge Osta's decision sent several important messages. First, law enforcement must respect constitutional protections even in emergencies. Urgency doesn't erase legal boundaries. Second, violations have consequences. Suppressing Anderson's statement wasn't symbolic. It meant the prosecution had to build its case without it. Third, justice can still be achieved without bending the rules. Anderson pleaded guilty anyway, received the maximum sentence, and will never leave prison. Fourth, judges must prioritize law, not emotion. Osta applied the Constitution as written, even knowing how painful the ruling would be for the community. When Anderson finally pleaded guilty, and Osta accepted the plea, she did so with the same steady professionalism. She confirmed Anderson understood the charge, listened to the family statements, imposed the mandatory sentence, and moved forward because that is a judge's role to carry out the law with clarity and restraint. Judges like Jana Osted, who make difficult decisions based on principle rather than public pressure, are essential to a functioning justice system. Some judges might have tried to find a way around the constitutional issue. She didn't. She followed the law, and justice still prevailed. And in the end, beyond the legal details and timelines, what matters most in this entire case is remembering who Elena was. She was 5. She loved Frozen, My Little Ponies, Pink and Purple. She sang, "You Are My Sunshine," and every morning she'd run into her parents' room to kiss them and make sure everything was okay. Elena was a daughter, sister, granddaughter, cousin, and friend. She was about to start kindergarten in a small town where everyone knew her smile. At her funeral, Reverend Nett said it best. She was a gift, full of love, free, and innocent. That's what 5-year-olds should be. And that's who Elena was. Her life wasn't defined by her death. It was defined by love, joy, and kindness. Her smile, her brown eyes. Her memory now lives on through the charity in her name. Every toy donated, every sick child helped, every Halloween party and memorial run, all continue what Elena started in her short but bright life. The statue in McCarthy Park is more than a memorial. It's a symbol of the love she gave. Photos of Elena show a child full of happiness. She had no idea evil existed. And that's what was stolen, not just her life, but the innocence of a child who trusted the adults around her. The innocence of a family who let a friend into their home. A town that believed this couldn't happen here. And yet, even through that loss, something powerful remained: resilience. The Hurl family's strength in honoring her memory. The town's support. And their decision to respond not with hatred, but with love. Love shared the way Elena would have wanted. Her obituary said it perfectly. Her love for others was free and innocent. Free of expectations, not just for family or friends, but for anyone who needed it. Not naive, just pure. That's the legacy worth remembering. Yes, she was murdered. Yes, justice was served. But Elena was more than a victim. She lived 5 joyful years. She gave love. She was loved. And even now, she continues to bring people together. Her death raises tough questions. How safe are our children? How well do we know those we trust? Could this happen to anyone? The hard truth is, yes, it could. Most harm comes not from strangers but from people we know. Some predators are masters at gaining trust. Warnings can be missed. It could happen anywhere, to any family. But there's another truth. Most people aren't predators. Most neighbors, friends, and coworkers are good. If fear makes us suspicious of everyone, we lose the trust that holds communities together. So, how do we stay safe without losing that? Start by verifying. Background checks matter, especially when adults are alone with children. Trust your instincts. When something feels off, don't ignore it. If a child says an adult made them uncomfortable, believe them. Teach kids they can say no, even to adults. Let them know it's okay to speak up. And support survivors, even those hurt in lesser ways. Their warnings matter. Remember, predators often appear trustworthy. Surface-level impressions aren't enough. And while we can build safeguards, tragedies may still happen. Sometimes families do everything right and still someone slips through. What matters then is how we respond. Watkins showed how, with vigils, community support, and a legacy of kindness, Zachary Anderson will never leave prison. That part of the story is closed. But Elena's story isn't about him. It's about her. A smiling little girl who loved deeply. A family that chose charity over despair. A town that stood together. A canine named Yankee who helped bring her home. Officers, prosecutors, and a judge who did their jobs with integrity and compassion. Behind every true crime is a real person. Someone like Elena Xener, who deserved so much more. May her memory be a blessing. May her legacy be love. And may we work to build a world where no other child is lost this way. Thank you for listening to Cold Case Desk. These stories are never easy, but they matter. If this one moved you, please leave a comment. Share a thought about child safety or simply honor Elena. If you're new here, consider subscribing and turning on notifications. Cold Case Desk is dedicated to telling these stories with care, research, and truth. You can also support us by sharing this video. Every view, every comment helps keep these victims remembered. Until next time, stay safe. Hug your loved ones. And share some love, just like Elena would. This is Cold Case Desk signing off.